My name is Linda Lee Jolly, and I'm the director here, and I'm thrilled that you chose to come out for the seminar this evening. I need for you to know that April is a really huge month here at the Troy Hayner Cultural Center. There are 11 events, 10 of which are listed on the flyer, and there are plenty of brochures there, so I'm not going to talk to you about every single one of those events, but some really cool stuff coming up, so I want to be sure that you don't miss out on that. We do put out a monthly e-newsletter now, so if you would like to receive that, we try not to bug you with a lot of spam, but once a month, and the occasional odd email. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep a hold of the line. There's a mailing list there if you'd like to be on the mail list to get the brochure 3 times a year, if you would like to get the once a mail e-news, and you don't think that that's coming to your house, then please sign up for that before you go. I want you to know that our next antique seminar this year is a little different and a little fun. This gentleman, Tim Kozel, is very excited about collecting vinyl records, which is kind of making the news now. They're even starting to reproduce them. He has a very extensive collection and a lot of information that he would like to share. So if you would like to hear that, please come back next month, April 21st at 7:30. You know, one of the things that we're excited about, seems like we just have a lot of parties because the house turned 100 years old, but this year marks the 40th year of us being the Troy Hayner Cultural Center. And our 40th anniversary is a Ruby anniversary, and we're ready to party again. So we're can't help ourselves. So we're going to have a Ruby Ball on April 30th, beginning at 6:30. Don't tell me you can't dance. You can learn a few steps as soon as you come in the door. The music's going to be nice. It's a Tom Doherty swing band ensemble, not the whole orchestra, but his ensemble. And food's going to be good, and the company's going to be good, so please come and help us celebrate Hayner at the Ruby Ball. There's still a few spaces, not many, left for Mrs. Hayner's birthday teas in April, so if you want to come to tea, you need to call or make your reservation right away. You have to pay as you go, so come and make your reservation. There are 9 seats left for the New York trip, so if you'd like to get on the bus and go to New York with us in the fall, it's time to make that reservation now. And we're just starting the second bus for the Columbus trip in June to see the Columbus Art Institute, eat at Schmidt's, and go to the Franklin Park Conservatory. So check out all of those trips and things that are happening that you need to register for in advance. I'm trying to think of which staff person is going to attack me tomorrow and say, did you tell him this? I think I've told you everything. Read the brochure. Okay, tonight we're very excited to have David Fair return. David Fair is an interior designer and the proprietor of David Fair on the Square in downtown Troy. He has done both residential and commercial projects in cities throughout the United States and in Canada. He opened his own residential store in 1986 and has focused on custom interior design since 1993. He's no stranger to Hayner. David serves now both on our house committee and our Christmas decorating committee, and we're so proud to have a man with his talent and expertise right here in our hometown. We frequently beg him to come and share his knowledge and insight with us. So tonight we're hoping that he will help us learn to evaluate our treasures and our unique finds, and to learn to treat them with the loving care they deserve, and how to incorporate them into our home environments. I present to you David Fair.
Thank you, Linda. Well, since I have such a captive audience, I've decided not to talk about antiques. We're going to talk politics. I don't know how many people will be dead at the end of it, but for those of you, Linda gave a brief history of my business. I started in retail, interior design, and decorative accessories in 1986, and did that until around 2000, 2001. At that time, I continued with my interior design business, but I kept it kind of on the low key. I used my lower level of my building on the square to house my wallpaper and fabrics and so forth. And at that time, I leased my space to Kathleen Schmidt, who opened a consignment shop, and she ran that shop for about 10 years. Then Kathleen decided to retire, and she said, "Do you want the key?" And I said, "Why not? I only work 60 hours a week. I think I can manage 90." But that brought about, and I kind of watched it because I was in the same building as she ran that for 10 years, but that brought about a huge influx of inventory that was antique and vintage and new and slightly old and slightly used and so forth. And even though in my design work, I've always been interested in incorporating antiques personally, but also for my clients. And I would say probably 75% of the clients that I work with have family heirlooms, antiques that they want to incorporate in their furnishings and their home accessories and so forth. So that's not an uncommon thing, and it's a pleasure for me because it's a personal thing that I like to do. And probably another percentage left over only want new things. I've had a couple clients that say I don't want anything old around me because it makes me feel old. So I respect that. Anyways, one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight is a little bit of clarification about what is an antique. And in the trade, which I'm in the trade, but there are many other people who are antique dealers. I'm not an antique dealer, but I have antiques in my shop and I utilize them in my business. The trade still holds to 100 years as being qualifying as an antique. There are some in the industry who hold to 80 years, and they base that on 2 generations of ownership or 2 generations of age, and that is 40 years of one generation followed by 40 years of another generation. But generally speaking, you'll find most dealers and people who are working in the industry will hold to the 100-year mark as being what is antique. As an interesting thing, the United States Customs has a very specific guideline about antiques. So they actually have a lot of guidelines about specific antiques like clothing and firearms and that kind of thing. But in the U.S. Customs, it can be declared an antique only if it is at least 50% original. It can be restored or repaired, but it has to be 50% at least original and 100 years old. As far as vintage goes, the trade, the industry holds to at least 50 years, but not as old as 100 years. And that's been the norm, if you will, for probably since it was really established as a word, antique, in the 1930s, especially when the U.S. Customs were trying to define what an antique was. In our business, we run into some interesting things. For me, learning about antiques is nonstop because there are so many things to know and so many categories and so many eras that my education in antiques is not going to stop until I stop. And I think anybody in the industry recognizes that because there are just too many things. I try to focus, because of my interior design business, I try to focus on furniture and decorative accessories. It's my love, it's what I prefer, it's what I use in my business. So there are a lot of things like vinyl records or tin cans or those kinds of things that I don't know a whole lot about, partly because I don't care. And to be truthful. And partly because there's just too many categories. The categories of antiques and vintage is as vast as we are as people, and so there's just too many things to know. But one of the things, and some of you know that my wife, my Vanna White sitting here tonight, Marla, is a restorationist in antique dolls and vintage dolls, and occasionally she will have someone come to her to repair a doll, as she did recently, and they will talk about the doll that was their great-great-grandmother's. And I brought one of those. This is great-great-grandmother's doll. Now, mind you, this was bought at Cracker Barrel in 1974. A lot of people, what happens a lot of times is there's an oral history that comes down, and Grandma passes away, and Aunt so-and-so says, oh, that was great, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the children absolutely believe it. And so they'll bring it to Marla for restoration, and she has to disappoint them frequently. Yes. She has had plastic and vinyl dolls brought to her that were great-grandmothers. Now, just to show you, I brought an antique doll, one of Marla's collection. This is a Jumeau, and this is from around 1900. So this is an antique, and you can kind of tell the difference between this and the girl from the Cracker Barrel. But anyways, we find it amusing because it happens frequently. And one of the things that a lot of people will say when they're bringing things into consign in the business is this is really old, which implies what? Really valuable. Not the case, always. And actually, the antiques market has taken a gigantic downward spiral since 2008 and the change of the economy and so forth. And a lot of things in that entire world have changed dramatically. One of the things is the millennials, the younger generation, they're not collectors. My parents, my grandparents were collectors. When you got married, you got a china pattern and a stemware pattern and a flatware pattern, and you acquired things, whether it be Royal Daltons or Belique or Waterford or whatever the case may be, and you added to your collection. It was what you did, and it's what your peers did. Millennials, our daughter, who's 31, no, absolutely not. This younger generation travels light. They're not collectors. They don't appreciate, in many cases, they don't appreciate these things. Or in some cases, even if they appreciate it, they don't desire it. Their lives are too busy, and they're not going to spend any time polishing silver or hand-washing crystal stemware, so they don't want it. And so what's happening is we're getting a flood of that kind of thing into the consignment portion of our business. Fortunately, there are still a few of us, old dinosaurs, and I put myself in that category, who still appreciate, like, enjoy, collect, and even use some of these things that are passing away from popularity. Speaking of, as I said earlier, old implies valuable. The reason I brought this silver tea set is this is a Victorian-era tea set. Lovely, beautiful, was in the shop for sale, was slated to go to the Goodwill. Millennials are not going to polish it. They're not going to use it. And so that really has changed the market. And that's where, and at one time that would have had, in 1965 and 1975, that probably would have been a $100, $125 set or something of that nature. I think its lowest price was $20 in our shop and still not sold. So I took it home and put it with the rest of my silver. But that's, yeah, there's a few teapots in the house. And I will tell you that most recently I had hosted a brunch for my two brothers and their wives, and we served coffee at the table in a silver teapot. Now, my daughter will never do that. But anyways, my point is, it's old, but it no longer has value. And it's only valuable in the sense of its aesthetic value and its beauty to those who appreciate it and want to care for it. But the industry and the world of antiques, of vintage, has changed dramatically. By the way, are there any antiques out there? Nah, not so much. I think everything here is pretty much vintage or about to be. Well, one of the categories that I wanted to talk about tonight is what's going to become an antique and what might people be looking for to collect or to utilize as opposed to collect. And one of those categories is the Depression-era furniture, which is not antique yet, but is coming up soon. Beginning around 1928, 29, and for the following 10 to 15 years, there was a tremendous amount of furniture made that had to be made affordable during this period of time. So a lot of it is actually plywood, and to make it beautiful and glamorous and desirable, it has tons of veneers. And I don't want to decry a veneer, because there are amazing pieces of furniture that have veneer on them that were made prior to the Depression era, and since then, during and since, that are marquetry, hand-done work that is extraordinary, that is exquisite, that is artistic. So a veneer is not necessarily a bad thing, although I have had in my career many people who see a piece of furniture, and if it's veneer, to them that's not so good. They want solid wood. Solid wood is great. One of the advantages of solid wood is that it can be refinished more easily than a veneer. Veneer is difficult to refinish. It takes a great deal of patience, and sometimes it can't be done at all because it depends on how thin the veneer is. But the Depression-era furniture is, for the most part, is almost 100% veneered plywood. Now, there were some higher quality things that were made, of course, at that time that sold for higher. But for the average middle America person in the midst of the Depression who had enough means to actually buy some furniture, the Depression-era furniture was the way to go. And there were so many styles throughout that period, 17th, 18th, and 19th century styles that were imitated, in some cases actually very closely, for whether it be Jacobean or a Spanish look or whatever the case may be. The question is it going to become valuable? Right now, it's kind of the what's the word I want to use? The poor stepsister, if you will. It is not considered, even still, to be highly valuable, highly desirable. And what's happening is a lot of it is actually hitting the market right now, because people who owned it and then gave it to, so for instance, my grandmother had a Depression-era set, which went to my mother. When it came to me, I'd already purchased something else, but it would have come to me, but I would have moved on from it to other things. And there's a lot of it on the market that is very low priced, comparatively low priced. And I can't tell you what's going to happen in, help me with the math, 2029? Yes, thank you. 2029, when the beginning of that era actually is here, and those things are 100 years old. One of the things that will be its advantage is that so much of what's being made today, imported from offshore, is so cheaply made that none of that, very little of it I should say, is still going to be here in 100 years, or 50, or 25. Our daughter, when she went to housekeeping, bought that kind of furniture, and some of it's already in the landfill. It just falls apart, it's made of particle board, it's laminated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of what's being made today, not all, but a lot of what's being made today isn't going to be here. So will someone who's 29 years old in 2029 and setting up their house, will they appreciate the Depression era? Will it be affordable? Will it increase in value? One of the things is, for the most part, it's American made. It does have dovetail construction. The veneers are, some of them quite exotic, burls and walnuts and ashes and all kinds of things. So it could be, and I can't predict, but we're going to talk about some Depression-era furniture here. There's a lot of stuff that's on the market that, are you ready? Vanna. Yes. So, and for some of you, this is going to be very familiar stuff. Either your grandparents have it, you have it, somebody has it. You see it in shops and so forth. Linda, is there a light to turn off yet? Do you think?
If it is, it'll be the whole room. Are you reading notes, or are you?
Oh, I can fake it.
You might have a light on your podium.
Yeah, that's good. I'm good. As you can see, this is some things that are. This look here particularly was so popular in so many variations, whether with the two doors on the side, the two drawers in the middle, and displayed in the center here. This table, I've seen a million of them in my career. The china cabinets, here we go with the veneers cut here, veneers here, all veneer on all of this here. Popular piece. Now this one's a little bit later with this detailing here. This is probably closer to the later 1930s or even into the 40s. This look here, which has lost popularity, may come back. We'll see. I can't say. I don't have any clients using it. But there's a way to redo all of this. Another couple of common pieces. This vanity style, hugely popular, and that's actually something that people are looking for because it's a little luxury thing to be able to sit at the vanity and do your hair and do your makeup and that kind of thing, as opposed to standing at the bathroom, sink, or what have you. Very common Jacobean style piece here. Now. Charming piece, this little bow front here and this little scroll detail is quite charming. This is what's happening to most of this furniture as well as many other pieces. And part of it is, it used to be if you wanted to repaint something and you wanted that paint to last, you had to sand and strip, which is difficult to do and sometimes ruins the veneers. Therefore they bubble, they crack, they fall off. With the advent of chalk paint, one-step paints that adhere to the finishes, a little bit of sanding is helpful because it takes a little bit of the varnish and so forth off. But suddenly you can paint a piece and it lasts and it sticks and you have a whole new look, as we'll see with the next few slides. Here's that, again, that very common styled buffet. This one with a little bit of drama. Now on this one they've actually left the top natural and did a little bit of rub off. This one they left the doors natural and the top. Left a little bit of its original integrity. This one's completely painted with the exception of the top. This one a little distressed for that little shabby chic look. A very common piece, very inexpensive, inexpensively made at the time, but a very purposeful piece that now has a new charm. Again, a little bit shabby chic. Little contrast working here that gives it new life and an updated look. This one steps a little beyond because what they've actually done is use toile fabric or wallpaper, I'm not sure which it is from the picture here, that they've applied to the inside of the drawers and the cupboard door fronts to give it a fresh look. The only thing about that, I would say, is that one might grow rather tired of that over not too long a time. But it was a unique purpose. I really like this one because the mirror was quite unique with these lines, getting a very little bit of a deco look happening here, Art Deco look. I don't know how it worked as far as doing your makeup because you had lines. Great color. This color is hugely popular on the market right now. Am I blocking it right? Turquoise and greens of all natures and blue greens and so forth. So that's a really fun look. And as you can see, they've done a little bit of rub off to give it a little bit of antique feeling, even though it's not an antique yet. Classic vanity that's been done in black with a little silver finish. That's really popular on the decorating market right now. Gray, silver, and variations therein are very popular. So a lot of furniture is being painted black and sells frequently as black or sometimes with a rub and so forth. Classic china cabinets. I never quite understood this design because so much of most china cabinets are designed to display the china and display what's in it. In the case of many of this Depression era, it was just about storage. And so all your things in there, very little of it showed. But again, repurposed into black or blue. That was quite charming with the really light interior, and it actually shows off the china a little bit. This one I have a hard time with, and the reason I say that is this is a later period. This is the mahogany period that came in the 1940s. And I love mahogany, and I have a hard time painting mahogany. But we get this style or similar style of this kind of china cabinet in our shop on a regular basis, and it would pain me to paint it white. But in some cases, especially the veneered ones, if it's chewed up, beat up, distressed, etc., sometimes it is the best option. And for a younger generation and their decorating tastes, it certainly is a younger feeling look than the stodgy old mahogany, like I like. This was a fun piece because it was kind of unusual, almost an etagere. I don't know if there have been some modifications to it, removed doors or something. I don't know if it was built that way, but it was really fun. It would be a great display piece. And again, this very popular color. There's a little interesting thing here with the etched doors to give it something a little fresh. This is a classic piece called a wardrobe, a whatnot. There's several names for it. Typically made in oak, almost probably 80% of the time made in oak, a golden oak. And this does definitely give it a fresher, updated look, although the lines are still a little bit fussy. I call this and the classic marble top table from the Victorian era. I said every family in America has one of these because I have seen so many of these, not always with drawers. Sometimes there's a fluted detail on the apron. But that six-legged oval table, like I said, I think almost every family in America must have had one of those at one time. So this is definitely a very updated look. Here's your classic, probably 1932, Depression era, distressed a little bit, updated. Now, sometimes people go too far. Somehow it looks like a cow that was hit by a truck. Uh-huh. I hear the audible, oh. Yeah. They've used fabric or wallpaper and paint or God only knows what all they've used here. But they took a rather interesting vanity here because this has quite a large mirror and some interesting detail. And a waterfall front dresser over here as well as a chest over here. And ruined it. Now this might appeal to some people. I'm not big on putting words on furniture as this is, especially because the words aren't complete. Not even sure what all it's trying to say. Safety matches of some nature from some company. But anyways, that's a no-no in my world. Now this one, this might be up for debate. There would be people who would positively love this, and it definitely is a reinvention of, this is actually a little later piece here. This is a 1950s piece. It's, again, not something I would do, but that's me. And if it appeals to you, I will send you the email, and you can go buy it.
That's the last one.
Let's see, what's next?
Light?
No, I'm okay. So we talked about the chalk paint, which has really transformed the whole painting of furniture because it's one step. Almost anybody can do it. And a lot of the chalk paint left to just one coat is very chalky and very powdery, if you will. But there are waxes that can be applied after the chalk paint, which will give you a smoother, more uniform look. I've done both to some pieces of furniture successfully and liked them both the chalky look as well as the waxed look. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about utilizing antiques in contemporary decorating. For some people, as I said earlier, antiques mean old. I don't like old. I don't want to be associated with old. Therefore, there's a disdain in some cases for antiques. And I want to show you some ways to incorporate antiques into some contemporary looks and settings.
And I have to switch slideshows, so I apologize if little Joe Cartwright shows up. Because I'm not, nope, you didn't get it. I'm thinking my screensaver's going to come up and my husband's going to go, uh-huh.
Yeah, she's 50, whatever, and she's still in love with
Yeah.
Joe Cocker. Anyways, all right.
How many women here agree?
Michael Landon, yeah. Okay. What I liked about this was everything in this space is completely contemporary with the exception of an antique painting. And so it's a contemporary space used in a contemporary way. It's not stuffy, it's not old, it's not old lady, old grandma feeling by any means. It's very fresh, and yet they've utilized an antique painting, which complements the space beautifully. In this case, what they've done is they've taken antique beds and they've painted them black, which again, as I said, is very, very popular. And so it's given it a fresh, updated look by having them black instead of being mahogany, which is likely what they were before. This one, as you can tell, clean, simple lines, clean, simple wallpaper, carpet, etc. They've taken a vintage piece of chest of drawers and painted it in a tasteful way, and created a new and a fresh look without it being, again, being old feeling, stuffy feeling, etc. What I liked about this, because there's actually a number of antiques in here, the French chair, the mirror, this mirror with something in front of it, this painting and this column, but what they've done is they've placed them in a very contemporary way, having the mirror very low, stacked underneath the other piece of art, and there's actually a beautiful curved French sofa in here. It's hard to see, but the sizable carpet, and then a simple white coffee table. Most everything in the picture's antique, but it's expressed in a contemporary way. What I liked about this was, again, a fresh, simple, you've got all white, you've got a contemporary expression of how the pictures are hung, clean and simple, the striped rug, and yet they utilize this antique chair, which is probably from about 1910 or thereabouts, with the rush seat and back. A great add to the room for texture without being stuffy again. This is the period that I love so much. We're going to talk about next, the 1940s, when mahogany and inlays and so forth came to be. But again, a very contemporary expression. They utilized very contemporary, ugly statue an antique chair that they've interpreted with leather, which is probably not original to it. But again, a contemporary expression utilizing one significant antique piece. Same thing here, utilizing this beautifully carved chair, but notice that the fabric on it, which is a harlequin diamond, which would not have been characteristic to the chair when it was made, but very interesting to see on that antique chair. I like this one because they've taken this chair, which was likely from the 1940s, the Queen Anne leg. They put a simple linen fabric on it, and they've expressed it, as you can see, with very contemporary, the striped carpet, the simple draperies, and so forth. So they've taken Grandma's chair, if you will, and given it a fresh look. This one is almost entirely contemporary, with the exception of two pieces, which is this really beautiful inlay chest and the antique mirror. But notice the contemporary interpretation by placing, instead of hanging a picture, another ugly one, they placed it on the mantle in front of the mirror. And of course you can see contemporary art, contemporary upholstery, the zebra rug, the striped rug. It's very contemporary, and yet within the middle of it are two beautiful antique pieces. Can you see back there? What I like about this one so much is a classic little French chair covered in a buffalo plaid, which is totally uncharacteristic for the chair, but enlivens the space. Another kind of interesting thing utilized here is placing an antique picture, looking, I don't know if it's really antique, inside an empty antique frame. Again, a contemporary use of an antique look. This one here, we've got some cute little English chairs around the Queen Anne table, so we have mixed styles here with these fluted legs and the Queen Anne leg. But in this dining setting, with the rough-hewn beams above here, a finished table, likely, I can't tell from the picture, I think it's pine actually, but against a banquette instead of the traditional dining setting with chairs all the way around. This one, again, utilizing the classic English chairs that have leather on them instead of damask or jacquard or something of that nature in a very contemporary setting. Same thing here, a little bit of a Jacobean style chair, inlaid chest, a nice mixture of antiques, but a contemporary expression of such a thing. And this one here, we're showing some treenware. This is an old wooden box here, set underneath a very contemporary table with numerous accessories, very contemporary ugly art. And again, a little French or English chair here with, again, a leather covering to bring it up to date. This one, I really like the use of treenware again. This is a dough bowl underneath this beautifully inlaid piece. I believe this is inlaid with mother of pearl. And then an antique mirror. And yet not stuffy or stodgy, mixing the antique pieces in with, again, a home you could live in and enjoy without it feeling like it was you're at the White House. And this one, again, the beautiful chairs mixed in, very contemporary, with the artwork, the expression by utilizing the high table in front of the sofa and the chairs, a good mixture of old and new, fresh feeling, and yet they're still utilizing antiques. What I liked about this one is that the classic sofa has been interpreted in a contemporary way in that instead of upholstering it all in one fabric, they've utilized this band through the center of the contrast color, which again relaxes and gives it a fresh new look as opposed to very classic. I mean, this is a beautiful classic chair, but that just, there's a little spin to that that's really fun. And this piece, because I love this piece of furniture, and I wanted you to see it. This is my era with urns and fluted legs and marble tops and all that kind of stuff. Those are fresh magnolia leaves. I would come up with a prettier arrangement on that. But anyways, I just love that piece. Again, kind of a contemporary expression in that instead of a ornate classic mirror hanging above it, it has very beautiful porcelain vases, but they've restrained by not having as fussy or as decorative a piece above on the paneled wall. And I think that's the end of that. Yes. Now it's not light in there.
Right, brace yourselves.
Yes.
It's a lot of light.
You're right. And then finally, what I like to talk about, because, get her out of here. What I like to talk about is my favorite stuff that I collect, which is the period that comes after the Depression era, but I think is highly collectible. I think it'll be more collectible than the Depression era stuff, and that is the stuff that was made particularly, it began some of it in the 20s and 30s, but really came into full swing in the 1940s. And part of that was because the furniture manufacturers, the American Mahogany Association, the Grand Rapids Furniture Association, there were so many of them, they went back to the patterns of Hepplewhite, Sheraton, Chippendale, and in some cases, reproduced them to the nth degree. And the craftsmanship, the workmanship, the materials were stellar. And it was very popular, especially in the 1940s into the 1950s, and then lost popularity. But in my opinion, humble as it may be, I would recommend to people that this is what they should be seeking and holding on to, and hopefully our children and our grandchildren will come to appreciate a lot of this. And I pointed this out in the past when I've done this, that, for instance, this is a Chippendale style chair, and right here on the bottom, you can see it is a brass plate. And, that brass plate is actually serial numbered. They took themselves so seriously and wanted these things to be so important that there's actually a library of who made them, when they were made, what company made them, serial numbered on the bottom. Now, not all of them are that way, but a number of them are. And those are the pieces I seek the most. One of the last times that I spoke, I talked about that library, and I've been trying to find it. It was in Michigan. From what I've understood from talking to some other furniture manufacturers, representatives, that library has been absorbed into another library, and I haven't been able to find it yet. But when I do, I'm going to go look up that serial number on that chair, and I'm going to know who made it. This is a favorite new piece that I acquired. What was interesting about this is all painted as opposed to inlay, but when I got it, this is a flip-top table. So this is one half of the flip-top. This is the other half. And I took it to my furniture refinisher. Look how beautifully it's painted here, and the other half is painted the same way. But this is a really thin veneer, and the restoration of this was way beyond the price and the value of the table. So I've kept it for posterity, if you will. And this has a brass plate on the bottom, by the way. It was made in New York. But what I did was I ordered a piece of granite to be placed on the top, which has given it new life and very complimentary. And I think, too, although granite was not commonly used in this era, marble more so, I think it has updated it but kept it classic. I am going to hang on to this. I'm not really sure why, because I'll never use it, but it's original, and I can't get rid of the original. Let's see. So many of these pieces are from that era. I did want to talk about, here's another Duncan 5 reproduction here. This piece is interesting to me. This is not a high-quality piece, and it's not high-quality wood, but it does have a brass plate on the bottom. The brass plate is not serial numbered. I think this is a prime piece for painting. Because it's not a high-end wood, it's not inlaid, it wouldn't bother me to paint this, whereas I couldn't paint any of these other pieces here. And this is a great, charming piece, great in a small hallway or a foyer or second floor hallway or something like that. So this came into the consignment shop. It hasn't sold. The next time you see it, it'll probably be some color. and even though the Grand Rapids Association and the North Carolina manufacturers who were all following the Hepplewhite and Sheraton and Chippendale, there was still a lot of other styles going on. And this little French chair here is an example of it, because this is from the same era. This actually has just a little bit of gold paint right here, a little bit of gold paint down here, but still made in that same time frame. It's hard to judge this when there's no indication, no manufacturer's name, no brass plate, but a charming piece, likely made in the 1940s. Let's see, is there anything else here to point out? Again, these are all reproduction-looking pieces. This is a charming table here. This one I could paint, maybe. It is mahogany, but its lines are really cool, and it is a flip-top card table. So it turns, and you can play cards or have tea.
Tea table.
Yep. And I think, and I always like to show this kind of stuff because it's my favorite, and I collect it, and it's my show. Now, at this point, does anybody have any questions?
What about that piece right there? Would you paint that?
No.
No.
No. Somebody else might. This actually has what's called ormolu, so this is a brass decoration. I actually have a pair of these, and I polished the other one, but it's very tedious work. And so this will actually brighten up to, not quite gold, but a much more shiny brass. And it has it down here on the feet, and here, and this is walnut.
Oh.
No. Yes.
Could you give me some information on a drop leaf table that has Asian decor? Was that the turn of the century, or?
I'd have to see it to really know, because the whole Asian influence had several incarnations in the early 1800s, the mid 1800s, the late 1800s. Not as much in the early 20th century.
It's solid wood.
Mm-hmm. I'd have to see it to be able to give you some indication. I'm not an expert, but when I can see, touch, look, turn over, etc., I can be a little more specific about what I think the age is, what I think the value is.
So you just
I really don't know. It could be early or it could be 1960s.
No, I know it's not that.
Okay.
I just, I would never paint it because of the
Bless you.
gear and all that. I painted other things, but because it has that artwork on it, that Asian feel.
Oh,
on it.
it's Japan. It's painted with scenes or trees or people
Right,
or
like
whatever. Yeah.
an Asian woman with
Right,
an
yeah.
umbrella crossing the bridge.
That was made all through the 20th century, still being made today. It's hard to say, but it could be 1920s because there was a whole influx in the 1920s with the Asian feeling, and it was a little bit akin between the Nouveau and the Deco period. So it could be one of
Do you
those.
get much of those?
We do get some painted pieces. It's called japanned, the description, if you will, when they are, even if they're from China, when they are decorated with trees, ladies' vases, what have you. Yeah, we get a little bit of it in. It's not very popular, unfortunately. I like it, but I'm a dinosaur. Yes?
If you were lovingly taking care of that piece or something that you didn't want to mess with, what would you clean it with? What would you polish it with? What's your choice?
My polish that I use is actually beeswax, and I buy it in Columbus. I can't tell you the name of the brand name right now, but it's actually made of beeswax, and I think it's one of the finest polishes on the market. Partly because it adds a little bit of moisture. It is 100% natural. It doesn't have polymers. It doesn't have fiberglass. A lot of Pledge used to have a little bit of fiberglass in it. What made your furniture shine was because you were rubbing it with fiberglass. Little tiny particles, fiberglass. My grandmother polished her tables religiously once a week, even though there was no dust, there was nothing on them, and she lost the finish on the top of them because she just... and it was because of the fiberglass. Yes?
Eastlake.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about it.
Late 1800s, I would say late 19th century was when it was the most popular. It's a little more valuable because it's antique, but unfortunately, a lot of it is not sturdy, especially upholstered pieces, so people don't want to use it. It's not sturdy because a lot of it was petite, and Americans are not. And so there's one of the reasons it's not in high demand. But for collectors and dealers who appreciate its workmanship and craftsmanship, it's still sought after. Especially, there are certain manufacturers, especially in the East, if it was made by that manufacturer, it still holds a great deal of value. Once the industrialization came in the late 1800s and early 1900s, things that had been handmade are now being machine-made and mass-produced. And so there's Eastlake that is highly valuable and Eastlake that's so-so.
An 1840s home would probably...
That's pre-Eastlake. Yeah. 1840s would have been a simpler look. Once Queen Victoria was in reign, and a lot of what became in fashion during her reign, which was 50 years or thereabouts, that's when things became much more ornate. But stuff from the 1840s, generally speaking, was simpler lines. And it was following a huge resurgence of the very classical looks of the 1800, 1820, in that period. Mm-hmm. Yes?
We have an old bonnet dresser. That was my daughter's. We bought it at an auction when she was little. It has like a real red stain on, and I think it's the original.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really mahogany. It's more red than that. And then I also have a mirror and a brush that was my grandmother's, and it has the same stain. What was that? I mean, or do you know?
I would have to see it to be absolute, but it sounds like a red mahogany stain, but it could be on a lesser wood, it could be on walnut, it could be on ash, it could be on poplar. It's hard to say for sure, but I've seen that before. It's almost too red. It's a little garish, actually.
At first it was like, we love the piece of furniture, and at first we thought, oh, we'll refinish it, and then we thought, maybe we shouldn't, and we never did. But yeah, it's different.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I've
not done chalk paint or anything like that, but we did have a wonderful family piece that we had milk paint on, and we had it professionally stripped, and then my husband finished it and whatever. So it turned out beautiful. When you're talking about now and some of these pieces, this generation putting chalk paint on, which is so popular.
Very similar to milk paint.
So what happens if someone down the road says, I want this back to this natural state? Is that something that can be restored back?
Unfortunately, a lot of woods, once paint has been put in them, it is so deeply in the grain. In order to get it completely out of the grain, you actually ruin the finish of the wood, especially when it's veneer, because the veneer is very thin. And so in order to draw the paint out of the grain, you have to strip it so hard that it will bubble. There's another word I'm looking for, but ripple. Yeah, it delaminates, exactly.
This one was solid cherry, and then it had some designs and laminated, like he said, it was like animal glue was put on, and we just used a warm iron and set it on with a piece of cardboard and warmed it, and it went right back after stripping. And it is a beautiful piece, but it was cherry.
Yeah, if it's solid, anything that's solid, you can usually reclaim. Although once again, it takes some hand finishing, hand rubbing to bring back the original luster that it would have had. Anybody else? Yes.
Musty smells. It's outside of sunshine. Is there a trick to that?
To getting rid of a musty smell? It depends. Depends on how long it's been, where it's been, and if it's mildew versus just old. Some people use dryer sheets. Yeah, that would only mask it. Baking soda and charcoal in a little pan inside a drawer, for instance, is a good thing to try to absorb. Anyone else? Yes, Christine.
On what you were saying about painting things, is this, I heard years ago that you destroy the antique value if you paint an antique, so is the antique value gone from these pieces when they're chalk painted?
Well, the question is, will the Depression era, which is what we were showing painted, will they even maintain value at all, painted or unpainted? And I can't answer that. I don't know where we're going to be in 2029 with not only fashion, but the generation that'll be, as I said, 29 and 2029. Will they appreciate it? Will they be seeking it because all their offshore imported stuff has fallen apart, so they're going to start looking toward things that are going to last longer? And I would say if the Depression era stuff does become sought after and its value increases, the painted stuff will have lost its value, lost at least some of its value. Yeah, but it does get, as you saw, a great fresh look, fresh decorating, and it's not antique yet, so I can't predict that. I'd like to be able to, but I don't know what's going to happen with it, because it was the poor stepsister for so many years, and still kind of is, as far as the quality of it and so forth. Yes.
So do you think some of the stuff that you're painting, it looks better with like some of the wood left exposed, like if the top is still nice, to leave the top wood and paint the rest, or like the outlines of the drawers, or?
Personally, I'm not big on, like the one buffet, for instance, where the doors were all left natural and the top was natural. I think the look from a decorating standpoint is better all painted, maybe just leaving the top natural.
Okay.
That's a personal opinion on my part.
And the black that's popular, is that like an enamel shiny black? Or?
Both. Actually, a lot of it is actually a satin or matte finished. What I see is...
did a big long, an old long low dresser. He cut the legs off and made it into a big screen TV stand.
Uh-huh.
And those big screen TV stands are expensive and
Yeah.
made of plywood. And his turned out awesome. And
Yeah.
he used a black enamel paint and took the legs off and then left the doors off and put his VCR equipment in.
Yeah.
So
The difference in a little bit with the matte satin versus the gloss will not hide imperfections. For instance, if there's a ripple or a delamination, if it's laminated, that will only emphasize it. The disadvantage of the matte and the satin is it shows fingerprints and like if you handle it and move it and so forth, it's just shows a little bit more in that regard, but it hides more imperfections that are inherent. It's a toss.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Just being in your store recently and that, I was born in the 40s, so I'm not real familiar, and I don't collect, I only have a few family pieces. This leather look that's on top, what period was that? It looks like tables that have like a leather with leather going around. What is that?
It was actually done off and on throughout several different decades and centuries, especially for desks. That was one of the key things. But again, that 1940s period with the leather inlay, part of that was because you could sit drinks on it and not have it leave a ring on the wood, but it actually can leave a ring on the leather too. Yes, set of step tables, absolutely, yeah. 1940s typically would be the era that became very popular. They're still making it today. Leather's so huge on the market right now, furniture-wise, and so leather's being applied, and there are all kinds of furniture that's leather clad, the entire piece, tables, bar stools, etc. Very popular, and partly too because of the cost of imported leather, particularly from South America, and even from Italy, has become more affordable, and so it's being used more and more, and it's hugely popular. So the demand is creating the.
You would want to leave that alone to show
Yes.
the leather.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't want to do anything to the leather. Yes.
Is mission furniture becoming more? It seems like I see reproductions of the mission furniture.
Yeah, partly because of its era and its time. The original, some of it's a little simpler, and that's appealing to today's market in decorating. That's one of the categories that I've not explored in depth to learn a lot about. We get some pieces in, a little bit of arts and crafts, a little bit of mission. And I think part of it too is that in the Southwest, you're going to find more of it than you do here in the Midwest, and so we don't see as much of it come through. But it blends nicely with leather and the contemporary lines and so forth. And there's some that's obviously more ornate than others, but some of the lines are really quite simple. Yes.
The Morris chair. You had any of those come through, and when did those come out? They're supposedly the precursor to the recliner.
Right, yeah. And they're probably referring to William Morris, I'm guessing, and probably late 1800s, early 1900s. We actually have a early, probably 1910 recliner currently at the shop, and it's oak. It's had been reupholstered in new cushions, but the way it reclines is there's a brass bar, and there are shelves, if you will, and you put the brass bar here, 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 or here, and the back goes according to where you put the brass bar. Yeah.
In our house, we have all ages and all finishes. How do I treat all these different finishes? As far as you said, you used beeswax. What?
Yeah, I think if it's all wood, the beeswax, the only thing, the beeswax is not going to work on painted pieces. No. But on walnut, mahogany, ash, burl, the beeswax, to me, is the best thing because it adds a little bit of moisture, and it's, as I said, very natural, and you can't harm it. So I wouldn't hesitate to use that on any of it. And I've seen your...
Yes, you have.
Your eclectic mixture. Embrace it.
We have to.
Yeah.
I have like a wooden bowl, and I'd like to finish sanding it, and then you finish it with what, like a linseed oil? I mean, it has to be, you put food in it? Or
You're going to use it for food?
Well, I'd probably put some fruit in it or something. So can you use anything real natural to finish it?
Yeah, the linseed oil is a possibility for moisture and keeping it from cracking and that kind of thing. But as far as the finish goes, most fruit, oranges, grapefruits, lemons, limes, they have a skin on them, so it's protected from anything that you might utilize that could potentially cause it to. Now with an apple, that's a little different because most people eat the skin of the apple. So I would put the oranges on the bottom and the apples on the top. All right, well, thank you so much for putting up with me this evening. I've enjoyed sharing with you some of my passions, and please come visit me at the southeast corner of the public square. Thank you.